You are listening to the Cookbook Love Podcast with Maggie Green, episode number 344.
Welcome to the Cookbook Love Podcast, a podcast that celebrates cookbook readers, buyers, collectors, writers, and clubs. And now your host, cookbook author, culinary dietitian, and cookbook writing coach, Maggie Green.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Cookbook Love Podcast. How's everybody doing today? As always, hope you're doing well. We are doing great here in Kentucky, having a beautiful April and looking forward to a trip this weekend to Chicago to visit our two sons. Very excited to do that trip, make the road trip up there because we haven't seen them since Christmas, and also because we're going to be there on a Friday during Lent, where we get to go to Portillo's and have their egg and pepper sandwich. It's not uncommon on a Friday in Lent to find a fish fry, but Portillo's makes, they're known for one of the things they're known for, their Chicago hot dogs and their steak sandwiches. But in order to have a meatless meal, they make an egg and pepper sandwich. So we had it last year. We're looking forward to having it again. And one of the fun things about going and traveling is learning about dishes that are popular at restaurants and in homes in different parts of the country. So very excited about that. Today on the podcast, speaking of regional topics, I'm excited to have an interview with Jan Brandenburg. Jan is a digital content creator, home cook, and pharmacist from Eastern Kentucky. As a vegan and wanting to enjoy the flavors of her childhood, Jan spent many years developing plant-based alternatives to traditional Appalachian dishes. Today on the show, Jan and I talk all about her new cookbook, The Modern Mountain Cookbook, and her journey from cookbook idea to publication, including her favorite vegan Appalachian recipes, her tips for plant-based cooking, and she is generous with advice for anyone who wants to write a cookbook and get it published. So without further delay, let's dive into this interview with Jan Brandenburg. Hi, Jan. Welcome to the Cookbook Love Podcast.
Thank you. Nice to see you again.
Yes, nice to see you too. Excited that you're here. We're going to talk all about your beautiful new book, The Modern Mountain Cookbook. But before we get started, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do?
My name is Jan Brandenburg. I am a pharmacist, yoga instructor, and now cookbook writer. I have lived in Appalachia my whole life. And recently, well, not that recently, 5 years ago, moved to Berea, but I've always lived in small mountain towns, and hence my love of Appalachian cooking. Have a tiny dog named Josie, who is probably going to make an appearance here soon. And love to cook, and I love to cook for other people.
Yes, and I'm so excited to have you here because you said you were a pharmacist and you love to cook. Because a lot of people wouldn't necessarily put those two things together to be a cookbook author.
Well, you do have a love of alchemy if you're a pharmacist. And so I think that, it's the same kind of gears that roll for both things in a lot of ways. There's a lot of chemistry in cooking. And I remember just like the Easy Bake Oven was just the most exciting thing to me.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. And I think that I've known you for a few years, beautiful example of someone who had a passion about a topic and wanted to write a cookbook about it. So let's talk first of all, a little bit tell us about Appalachia. What does that mean? And what does it mean to you? And what part of Appalachia are you from?
I am from Eastern Kentucky and have lived there for most of my life, went to school there. A lot of people are familiar with Red River Gorge, so I grew up very close to Red River Gorge. And Appalachia is a region, and you can look it up to get the exact definition, but, I lived in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. And so we have a lot of traditional ideas about cooking, cornbread being one, like a real staple. And when I became vegan, I wanted to have like my values surrounding animals match up with the kind of cooking that I love. And I didn't want people to come to my house and be disappointed that they didn't have cornbread, for example. Yeah. So I needed to adapt all of those recipes, and it just kind of grew from there. I started out, when I first started transitioning to a vegan or plant-based lifestyle, I did do a lot of cooking that was a little bit foreign to me and my family. And I still do that because those are things, I love barley and wheatgrass. These are things that I like. But people that I have over to eat, and, when you're cooking for your family, you want something that feels like comfort food to them. We're big on comfort food. And so I just started developing recipes, transitioning everything over. And then one day I was like, I have a cookbook here.
Yeah. Yeah. So you took things that they loved, comfort foods that they loved, and you tested them and translated all the ingredients into vegan ingredients. Tell us what vegan means.
Vegan actually, so there's plant-based and there's vegan. Plant-based means everything comes from a plant. Vegan is really more of a lifestyle. So if you're vegan, you tend to not use anything that comes from an animal. It doesn't matter if you wear it, put it on your face or body. You really are making every effort to not include anything that harms an animal in your entire lifestyle. So that is more of a lifestyle.
Yeah. And then in the ingredients for your cooking, it's obviously nothing from an animal in any of the recipes that are
correct.
in the book.
Yeah. Which also means it's cholesterol free. I like to point that out.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's not the way traditional Appalachian cooking is.
No, it is not. Yeah, there's some lard involved and a lot of animal products, but it's really not as hard as you would think to make that transition. It's a slow learning process, and or a quick learning process now because there's so much information available. I started with Moosewood Cookbook, which was a very plant-based, whole foods, whole grains, and just a lot of things that would have been foreign to traditional cooking in my area. Yeah. And, I've learned to love a lot of those foods. I eat plenty of tofu, and there's tofu in the cookbook. But still, you want the things that are like comfort foods to you. That's what we want. We want our comfort foods. We want what we grew up eating. Those just hold a special place in our heart.
Yeah. Well, it seems to me that you would be the perfect person to write this book, because anybody could take a set of recipes and veganize them, but you have a connection to these recipes in a way that I think is special because of where you're from, where you lived, and how you raised your family and fed people who were around you. And tell me a little bit about this transition and then the response of the people who you were feeding.
The transition was just like I've said before that it's kind of like unraveling a sweater. Like you get some information and it's like a small little pick, and then you get more information and suddenly it's just like, this sweater's a mess. I can't wear it anymore. So, that was the unraveling of the lifestyle that I had before. And I knew that I wanted to fully embrace being plant-based. For my family, it really was not that hard a process because, people are happy when you cook for them. They like that. There's not that many people who do a lot of cooking and just invite lots of people to their house anymore. And and I will say that, I'm a pretty good cook. So most of the time when people came over, I would try to have something that felt comfortable. I might have something that was a little bit newer. And nobody really seemed to complain. And I think they didn't act like it was really odd because they were just happy to have somebody cook for them. And so my whole family always still comes for Christmas, for Thanksgiving. If you look on my Instagram, you see I host a lot of birthday parties. They're all really happy to come and eat.
Yeah.
Nobody is really unhappy. I only had the one episode of the bad soybean casserole. That was a little rough. That was one of my first casseroles when I was like, hey, we should eat nothing but plants. And so my husband was like, son, you've got to try this to my 5-year-old. And he tried it. and it did not stay down at the table. So he really did make an effort. And after that, we cleared the table, and I said, I can do better.
We're going to there's nowhere to go but up from here.
Yeah, nowhere but up from here. And so, what I did was get like some real basic recipes. Like, I got the mac and cheese down. I got veggie burgers and just things and they loved beef stew. So I have something called farmhouse stew. They've always loved that. Traditional breads. So once you get like 4 or 5 things in the rotation that, okay, if I make a blunder one weeknight, the next night we're gonna make it up. So it really, when I look back on it, I don't see it as difficult as I see it as an adventure.
Yeah, I think you're right. And then you had developed and collected all these recipes. Tell us about the journey to actually deciding to write a cookbook and getting a cookbook contract.
Well, it was way easier than I thought. I was just driving to work one day, and I always, this is what I really do encourage anybody who's interested in writing a cookbook to do. Keep up with what you've done. It's very, we get in the kitchen and we start winging it. And so I'll start with a recipe, and I'm always changing recipes. You probably know this and do the same. So even if it's only a small change, if you change from a 1/4 to a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, always jot it down. So I learned to do that. And, I just had a big collection of recipes. One day I was on my way to work and I heard, them talking about UK Press, heard them mention an editor specifically. And I thought, I'm going to do that. So I just wrote out the proposal. I sent it in. And within a month, she accepted it. And it's been a long time between the acceptance and the publication. But I was like, wow, that really just happened. So it can be done. Just keep up with everything that you do. And I always like to write. So it was a real natural thing because this cookbook is a little bit memoir too.
Yeah.
And that just came very naturally.
Yeah. And I think that if people aren't in the habit of, writing, and writing doesn't come naturally, it really does just start initially with being willing to kind of keep track of what you're doing in the kitchen. Yeah.
Keep up with everything.
Yes. And I think that's really super important. And you're right. If you're a regular cook, regular in terms of you cook on a regular basis, let's say it's even 4 nights a week. And maybe over the course of 2 months, that's 60 days. That would be, you cook probably 20, 25 different things over that time.
Yeah.
And I think that people would be surprised how easily the content can really be thought of if you are someone that cooks on a regular basis. Plus, you weren't a food writer, a professional chef. And I think that that's important to point out and for people to understand is that your experience with this food came from the life you were living in your kitchen. Yeah.
And just wanting to share it.
Yeah. And I think that's important too. You wanted to share your food. You wanted to have people over. And I think the wanting to share your recipes then and your story so that other people can experience this is a natural offshoot of it also.
It's funny. The other day, somebody who lives here in Berea, she had said something like, I can't believe that you were willing to give your recipes away so easily. Yeah. She said most Appalachian cooks are so protective of their information. But I said, I just want to save the animals. That's my goal. Yeah. And every plant-based meal, step in the right direction for me.
And I think recipes, when they're shared, have an infinite potential to affect people's lives in a positive way. And I think that I love your attitude about being willing to share yours.
Anytime, yes.
I think it's a wonderful thing. So let's talk a little bit about the book. Tell us about the chapters and maybe the way that the recipes are laid out.
It follows like kind of a standard day, I guess. We start with breakfast and then we've got lunch, sandwiches, appetizers, main courses, vegetables and sides, desserts, and then what I consider the backbone of vegan cooking, like gravies, sauces, marinades, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So those kind of things really can be a little bit more important in plant-based cooking because say you're starting with something like tofu, which really doesn't impart a flavor of its own that much. It's all about the preparation, the texture, and what you add to it. So it will take on those flavors.
Yeah. And I think that you have some things in here that maybe people would have a hard time believing in this backbone chapter that they could even make vegan. Everything from gravy to a dry mix to a cheese sauce. So I'd love to talk specifically about a few of those if you're willing.
Okay, sure.
Because I think that those are the things that people think, I can't cook plant-based or vegan because I don't know how to do this. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So what would you like to start with first? Which backbone do you think was really pivotal when you think about your trajectory as a cook and translating these recipes? Once you got this down, it changed everything.
Well, I think that macaroni and cheese is something that everybody loves. It's something kids love. And I think that everybody really loves my mac and cheese. So I think that that's one that if you're making a transition, getting that down, because it's very versatile too. Say you want to throw some broccoli in there, you want to throw some tomatoes or anything like that to add veggies to it. But if you start with that base of macaroni and cheese, you're going to get everybody to eat it.
Yeah. Would you be willing to talk about the sauce and its preparation and any tips you have?
Yeah. So when you get ready to make cheese and cream sauces, you do need a high-speed blender. That is a piece of kitchen equipment that you will need. And it starts with a cashew base most of the time. Sometimes I'll substitute pine nuts depending on if I want a little bit more tang or not. But and also use a vegan chicken broth. That has a combination of flavors that just adds depth. Tamari adds that umami flavor. So those are all things that they're kind of essentials if you want to really explore plant-based cooking. I mean, there are plenty of things you can make without that, but if you want to do any of the creamy sauces, and I think that is part and parcel of Appalachian cooking, those are things that feel like comfort food to us. So I highly recommend that. But that's one of my favorites to go to if you're cooking for others, because if you're having a traditional Thanksgiving meal or you're having a birthday meal with vegetables, some mac and cheese is a good thing to have.
Yeah, who doesn't love mac and cheese? So what about the gravy? Gravy and biscuits, sausage gravy is a big popular dish. Tell us a little bit about that.
It is. So I usually use Gimme Lean brand sausage, which is the soy sausage, and you prepare it just like you would a traditional gravy. You're just substituting those plant-based ingredients. I will say that soy milk is my preferred because it thickens up a little bit nicer. So, and it has to be unsweetened, of course. You don't want to have any strange vanilla flavors or anything like that floating. I feel like that most of the time. I never buy the flavored milks. I always buy unsweetened everything that I get.
Yeah.
Soy milk. And so you just brown your sausage. Now there is Impossible sausage. That's another brand. It's really good too. So either one of those is fine. Whatever is available. These are things that are pretty much available in, if you go to Richmond, Kentucky or Berea, Kentucky, you can find these products. They're not rare anymore.
Yeah.
You just brown it, sprinkle that flour over it, and season it with salt and pepper. I do like to use a little liquid smoke. That's one of my favorite plant-based ingredients. And we know what it's replacing.
Yeah.
And then it just thickens up really nice once you put the soy milk in.
Yeah. And I think that that sounds great. And I think that you made an important point that these ingredients are more readily available, even in small town grocery stores, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. Clay City, I pass through there going to the Gorge lots of times still because I love Miguel's Pizza so much. And they do have plant-based pizza now.
Nice.
But if you go to Clay City or Stanton, Kentucky, there you are. You can go in Kroger and get some Impossible sausage.
Yeah. When did you see that shift for ingredient availability?
Honestly, around COVID time, probably. Yeah. I think that more people became, thinking about things like that. And now I'm honestly seeing a little shift back the other way because of just the more rare products. For instance, for a while I could in any town get my spray can whipped cream for Sundays, and now I'm struggling a little bit. So it fluctuates, but way better than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah. What do you
Yeah.
do if you can't find something in a supermarket?
I make my own.
Yeah.
I have a good whipped cream recipe. I hate to make it because it's just so good. You just want to eat it by the spoonful.
Yeah.
With this, it just dispenses a tiny bit at a time. But I do make it for my pumpkin pie for holidays.
Yeah, that's great. All right, so let's talk about other recipes in the book, some other things that you would love to share that you feel have a flair of Appalachia, something that might surprise people that they can have great success with as a plant-based or vegan recipe.
Well, one of my very favorite ones is one that I modified from your recipe for beer cheese.
Oh, yeah.
Out of Kentucky Fresh.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I probably use a little bit more garlic than you would have recommended, but I make it for every gathering. That is, like, people expect to have my beer cheese, and they cannot believe that it does not have cheese in it.
Yeah.
I try to use like a local IPA. I do like one that's really hoppy. Mm-hmm. And I try to use local hot sauce, like Screaming Mimi's from Louisville.
Right.
But that is one that I make probably at least every week or every 2 weeks. And that was one of the first ones that I tried out of your cookbook. I was like, okay, this looks really good. I'm gonna give it a whirl with the plant-based ingredients. Yeah. And it has been wildly popular ever since.
Good. So tell everybody that's listening that's not a Kentuckian what our beer cheese is like. Because there's different styles of beer cheese, believe it or not. Some are thin, some are thick. But let's talk about Kentucky beer cheese.
Kentucky beer cheese started in Winchester, Kentucky. At the Almonds, I think, was the name of the restaurant. And they even hold a contest there every year, which I'm thinking I might enter that one.
Oh, you should. Do they have a plant-based category?
No, but I think I can compete with the real guys.
I think you could too, and that might not even be something that people would know. What Jan's talking about is the Beer Cheese Festival in Winchester. They have a beer cheese contest, and there's a commercial category, and there's home cooks that have a category, and it's a judging just like at a state fair for pies, but this is for beer cheese. Yeah, I think you should.
If you haven't ever tried beer cheese, it's its own style of cheese. It's spicy. Usually got some cayenne in it, and it just goes really great with like crudités, radishes, celery, carrots, and it's just a really popular. It's always here on game day. I can tell you that.
Yes.
If there's a Kentucky ball game, we're going to be having some beer cheese.
Yes. Yes, and I think it's great, the idea to use a hoppy IPA, a Kentucky hot sauce, and a little more garlic. I think it sounds delicious.
Yeah.
So when you look at the cheese section and you're buying a cheese for something like beer cheese, is there a particular brand that you use or a particular style of cheese?
Yes. I like to go for a block of cheese. Mm-hmm. So I generally use one called Daya, which is it's DAIYA. Mm-hmm. And that one's available everywhere. You can substitute the slices if you can't find the block, but the block has a better texture. And I think there's an additive in the ones that are like pre-shredded and the slices that to me, it's not the same. Not the same. I prefer the block.
Right.
I actually have the local health food store here order a case of blocks for me at a time.
Nice.
But if you have a tiny health food store anywhere close to you, they're very willing to do that, and it's a popular brand, so it's always available.
Yeah, yeah.
And then Philadelphia cream cheese actually has a plant-based cream cheese now, nice. So you can always have that one. I prefer a brand called BioLife, but I will use Philadelphia if that is not available, and no one has ever complained. And then, like I said, I like to use Screaming Mimi's hot sauce.
Yeah. and you shred your own cheese, and then you, of course, mix it all together. And one thing I've always loved about beer cheese, also, if you make it ahead of time, it holds well in the refrigerator.
Yes.
You can portion it out and give it as gifts in little tubs or jars, and people love it. So I'm so glad that we are sharing the wealth here about beer cheese, and it's a wonderful tradition in Central Kentucky, and I highly encourage everyone to give it a try. Some of the beer cheese, I live near Cincinnati now, still in Kentucky, but some of the beer cheese up here is thinner, and it's more like a liquid, like cheesy dip that people might dip like a soft pretzel into. Yeah. So not quite the same spreadable texture as the beer cheese that I grew up with.
No, mine is a spreadable texture. Now I do, whenever I first make it, I will make it on soup speed on the blender because it warms it up and you really don't have to do much shredding or anything. You just cut your cheese up into little blocks, drop it all in the blender and put it in there. So you might have to add like a little bit more beer if it's not blending really quick for you, and then just let it cool, put some plastic on top of it while it cools. And but I will say that when it's still been hot, I've dipped some tortilla chips in it. Pretty good.
Oh, yeah,
so that's probably more the consistency that you're talking about.
Yeah. So is the soup speed on your blender actually warm the product up? Oh wow.
It does. Yeah.
It's
a Vitamix. Before I always used Blendtec. And it had like a 12-year warranty. That's why I got it. It's the one that they use at Starbucks. And so they replaced the motor in mine twice.
Wow.
I do a lot of blending, and I always say that my kids will tell you that they walk up to the sound of the blender every morning with me making smoothies.
Yeah.
And so they did that twice, and then it was out of warranty. And then I had a meal and it died. And so I had to get one the next day. And so I got the Vitamix because I could get it overnight. And it's been good. Yeah. It works for me.
That's good. Yep. And I think I can see with cooking this way, with making your sauces and, using cashews and things like this, that the blender is something that you use a lot.
Yes. Definitely do.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about your breads. I know that bread is something that you love. You started talking about cornbread, how that's really what got you going with this, but tell us a little bit about the breads.
There are three that I make the most. So I recently have, I kind of forgotten about my French bread. And so I'm definitely going to put that one in the next cookbook. But cornbread, very few ingredients, very simple to make. A lot of people think you need an egg for it, but you do not. I put vinegar in soy milk, and that thickens it up just like a buttermilk. You will not know that you're not looking at buttermilk when you see that. And then I use liquid smoke, a little salt, self-rising cornmeal. One thing that I do like to do is once I get my vegetable shortening hot in the skillet, I like to sprinkle a tablespoon of cornmeal in there and brown it. And that just gives your cornmeal a really nice exterior, very nice crunch on the outside.
I see. So you put the shortening in the skillet, preheat that, and then brown the cornmeal, and then you pour the batter into that, right?
Yes, just that 1 tablespoon browned in there.
I've never tried that. I've always preheated the skillet and put the fat in, but I never have done the cornmeal trick. That's a great trick. And, this is what is so fun about cookbooks is that's a tip that you have from living the experience of these recipes, and sharing them is it's great. So that's a great tip.
Yeah, well, let me know if you like it.
Yes. And we got to have our cornbread. It's funny now. Yes. When we were raising our children, I made cornbread all the time. And the other night I made beans and rice for dinner, and I just said something to Warren like, "Is there anything else we ought to have?" And he said cornbread. And it's so funny that he said that because I probably haven't made cornbread in a while because it's just the two of us. And anyway. But you know how that goes. It's like we don't need to be like sitting around like eating a whole pan of cornbread.
A whole pan of cornbread.
Right. But it is, when it's done right, it is so good. And the crunch on the outside is the best. It's really, really good. So there's a great recipe in here for cornbread. And you're right that it is an Appalachian staple.
Yeah. And I do, I have a recipe for maple butter in there, maple cinnamon butter. And that is really good on the cornbread, depending on the meal you're having. But
what do you have a brand of vegan butter that you like to use?
Yes, I do. for cooking anyway. I think Miyoko's is really great if you're just putting out some butter for people to put on rolls. But Earth Balance is just great for cooking.
Yeah.
The texture of it is perfect.
And they have sticks too.
Yes, they have sticks. I always just get the sticks. That's all I ever get.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that's the cornbread. Tell us what else is in your bread chapter.
The rosemary bread. Now, this is a bread machine recipe. I never bake any loaves in the bread machine because I just don't like the way they turn out. I never have. But I will always, it's such a perfect little environment to just knead your dough. And if you're busy cooking and preparing a meal, you can just throw everything in the bread machine, turn it on the dough cycle. For rosemary bread, in an hour and a half, it's ready to pop in the oven. It doesn't have to do any more rising once it comes out. And so it bakes for 20 minutes, and it is delicious and will make your house smell so wonderful.
Yes. Nothing like homemade bread.
Yeah, that's just the scent that I think of the most.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right. All right. Sounds great. And what about biscuits? Talk about biscuits also, because those are really when I think of biscuits, I think of the South also, but I know that they're a big part of Appalachian cooking.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They got to go with the gravy.
Yes.
Yeah. So mine uses some sour cream and cream. And I think the biggest, so we were on a trip once and my son was like, hey, we're going to make a chicken pot pie. I like to put biscuits on it. Show me how you make your homemade biscuits. He went at the dough so hard. I'm like, this is a different kind of bread making. With biscuits, the less you handle the dough, the better. So I think the best thing is always to just fold it a lot. So you just treat that dough very delicately and you fold it. And I try to fold it at least 3 times so that you get those nice stacked flaky layers in there. And they're very beautiful when they come out of the oven.
They really are.
Yeah. So those are probably, and the other bread that I make a lot is cornbread focaccia.
Oh, wow.
So that is just when you really want cornbread, but it doesn't go with what you're having. So it's a really great appetizer because it goes really nicely with a glass of wine. And you just season it with Italian seasoning and some rosemary and some vegan parm. And then I put on top of it olives and red onions and cherry tomatoes halved. And it bakes up just like a regular cornbread. But then you just cut it into tiny pieces and serve it as an appetizer.
Nice. And what kind of pan do you bake that in?
Oh, the skillet.
Yeah.
Yeah, the cast iron skillet.
Nice. I bet it's very good.
It's really good.
Very good. And a nice way to add some flavor with the vegetables that you put on it and the olives as well.
Yeah. It's just when you're trying to squeeze in cornbread and it really might not go.
Yes. Yes. So what about things like mayonnaise?
Those are really very available
good.
Now.
Yeah.
The Hellman's plant-based mayo is great. And it's everywhere. There are a couple of other brands, but because that one is so widely available, that's generally what I use is the Hellman's.
Nice. Yep. All right. And one more thing I know that you're known for is your chocolate chip cookies.
Oh, gosh. What I was doing right before we got on here was assembling my ingredients to make 4 dozen chocolate chip cookies. Yeah, they ran out at work yesterday.
They got to have some more cookies.
Yeah. Yep. Those are really good. A lot of people are like, you would never guess that they didn't have eggs in them, but I mean, it's a cookie. So I don't think that's really that shocking. I do think that applesauce adds like this lightness to them that might be the difference because so many people do tell me it's the best chocolate chip cookie that they've had.
Yeah. So you use applesauce and use butter or oil?
I use the Earth Balance sticks.
Yeah.
And then you use the applesauce. And I use a replacer powder. I don't mix it up like I'm making it into an egg. I just throw that powder right in the mix.
Okay.
And you just want to make sure that once you've mixed those first ingredients, it looks super fluffy, and it will. Yeah, if you just mix it long enough.
Yeah. Well, with the prices of eggs these days, I think it's kind of fascinating that you have all the recipes now that are egg-free.
Yeah. No. And for people who just don't want to go to the trouble of those things, there's just egg liquid. You just pour it right out of a carton.
Yeah. And it's vegan egg liquid.
It is, made out of pea protein.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you can measure it out. There's probably a certain amount. Usually for regular eggs, it's like a quarter of a cup would be equal to an egg.
Exactly.
And then you can substitute that in the recipe for every egg, just the equivalent amount.
There are a lot of different egg substitutes, but for my baking, I generally use the applesauce and Bob's Red Mill egg replacer powder, which is a lot of tapioca starch.
Yeah. Interesting. So one of the things that people talk about using, and you mentioned in some of your recipes, is saving the liquid and using the liquid from a can of chickpeas, the aquafaba. And making using that as an ingredient. Can you talk a little bit about your experience with that, and if you have any tips or recipes for things that people might be able to use aquafaba in?
I do. Two really wonderful recipes developed for my grandmother, who lived in Pulaski County and made the best pies. So one is the chocolate cream pie, and you use an aquafaba meringue, and it just bakes up just like egg whites. Looks just as beautiful. And then the other is her Italian cream cake. And you also and I always use chickpeas. I've used other bean brines, but somehow chickpeas have always just been, and because I love chickpeas, then I can just throw those in a salad.
Yeah.
So it's also a matter of convenience. But
I wonder why it's so much different. You're not the first person I've heard say that.
Yeah. It's probably a protein content, I would guess, if you did a comparison between white beans and that. I would think that there's maybe some difference in that, but I haven't looked. I just have kind of gone with my gut, and the chickpeas work best.
Yeah. Very good. Well, those all sound delicious. I think it's a wonderful book all about Appalachian food, made vegan from someone who knows. And I heard you say that maybe you have an idea for another cookbook. So I wondered if you'd talk people through this conceptual phase and what goes on in the brain of a cookbook writer when they're thinking about their first book or their second book, and the kinds of things that you're focusing on and paying attention to as you possibly move into that project.
So I write every morning, I journal every morning. And a lot of times, this is what is continually in my mind. I'm constantly thinking about cooking. That's what I love to do. And I think thematically a lot. So, if I'm gonna invite people over, we might just want to do something fun, like have a luau. And so I have centered a lot of recipes about that. And that's actually how this second idea for a cookbook came into my mind, is because we did that so much, and I developed so many new recipes. I had to learn how to make a s'mores pie that was vegan, a fried ice cream pie, and, queso dip if it was a fiesta. And so I always, like I said, I always write everything down.
Yeah.
And then, as I was winding this one up, in the editing process, I just started thinking, I have a lot of other recipes, and a lot of them are very themed.
Yeah.
And wouldn't it be fun to put all that together, like plant-based celebrations, large and small?
Yeah.
Birthday party ideas for kids, birthday party ideas for adults, and everything in between.
Yeah. And I think that comes from sounds like you entertain a lot.
I do. It's not always a huge group,
but
I tend to have people over once or twice a week, and I work full time.
Yeah.
So it is what I like to do.
Yeah.
And I think that cooking maintains our social connections as we, go through life. It's important.
Yeah. Jan, you're the perfect person to maybe help people who are listening to this podcast with the fact that you work full time and that you've written a cookbook, because a lot of people might say, well, I don't have the time to write, or I don't have the time to work on the cookbook. So tell me how you reconciled that.
Like I said, I do like to write, and when I start developing recipes now, I think in terms a little bit of a narrative that might go along with that. So it's just a process of getting in practice of documenting. It really, everything is about documentation.
Yeah. And maybe that comes from your healthcare background. Do you think?
Maybe so. I certainly
Yeah.
do. I certainly do it
Yeah, and it's
at
kind of
work
funny.
and at home.
Yeah,
Yes.
as I think about that, like my professional life prior to what I do now was as a dietitian working in hospital, nursing home. I was food service director, and I guess I did a ton of documentation also as a result of that.
So you get used to keeping track of things, knowing what you did, and reproducibility. When you check a recipe a bunch of different times, you want it to, you want to make sure that it's going to turn out the same every time.
Yeah.
And so I do. I have a friend group now that is willing to cook, and so a lot of times I'll have people test things for me just to see does this turn out the same for you as it does for me.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think that people that that are your friends that do cook, when you are working on a new recipe, if they're willing to run through something and see if it works for them, it's a great way to make sure that things work. Yeah, it really is. And that they can find the ingredients, that it tastes good, that it works in their kitchen, all those kinds of things. And then you almost head into the cookbook project with a set of recipes that they work in your kitchen and in someone else's before you really even put the book together.
Yes.
So, yeah.
My one friend loved that Italian cream cake of my grandmother so much. She probably has made it more than I have at this point.
Yeah. I was reading your cookbook and I read the funniest thing that you said about your grandmother, Elva. And you've got to tell the story. Like there was a way that you described her as an Appalachian grandma and the things she would say when you all would be leaving and the experience you had with her in her kitchen and the things she would do to kind of block out all the chaos. So tell me about Elva.
Elva was like a 5 foot tall little whirlwind. And when we ran restaurants in both the local stockyards and the tobacco warehouse, my family did. And she could make like 10 pies, sometimes a dozen pies before 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning. Turn those out of her kitchen. And, all the grandkids, they are just underfoot. And so, and she also was queen of the cautionary tale. So what you're probably talking about is when I got a pony and I was so, so excited about this pony. And she said, well, just remember that little girl down the road. She got a pony, it bit her face clean off. And the clean off really stuck with me because, as a kid, you get a terrible visual of that.
You also said that you would say, okay, Grandma, whatever. What did you call her?
We called her Eddie because the first grandchild couldn't pronounce Elva. So she was known as Eddie, which she didn't especially care for, but every grandchild, 7 of them, called her Eddie.
You'd say, okay, Eddie, we're going to the amusement park. And what would she say?
Oh, she was like, well, watch out for razor blades when you go down the slide.
It's so funny.
Yeah, she was very, very cautionary, but also she, at one point she would get really tired of the noise from all the grandkids. And so she had 2 things she would do. She was a very good piano player and organ player. And so she would go and just start playing the piano when she got tired of, all the noise from the grandchildren. And, we could ask 1,000 questions and she would just nod her head and just keep playing the piano. You knew when she went to play the piano or to get on the sewing machine that
she was ignoring you.
Yes, she had enough of the 7
you said
of us.
She'd just play louder and just like nod and smile.
Just nod her head.
Right.
Yes, I can still see it right now.
So funny. So funny. And the sewing machine, that piano might be something people still do, but I kind of hope sewing's making a comeback. I think maybe in some places it is, but
she insisted that we know how to sew.
Yeah,
Your mother sewed?
Oh, yeah, she sewed. She was, when we were little, my grandmother sewed, and aunt would sew clothes for us, and they always had a tape measure. There were 7 girls, and every time we got to their house, no matter who it was, they'd always say, okay, let's see how tall you are. Let's see what your inseam is now, how long your arms are, how long your legs are, always measuring us so that if they were going to make clothes or buy clothes for us, they always had our measurements.
That's really funny.
It is funny. And then my mother got into making, I think she liked it. It was kind of like a creative outlet for her. She didn't make a ton of clothes, but she always was making pillows. And she got into making banners like that we would hang outside of our house. So right now, because Kentucky's in the Sweet 16 for the NCAA basketball tournament, I've got a big K flag. It's a blue background with this big white K that my mom made years ago. And every time, Kentucky's playing, I hang it out. I'm pretty careful about it though, because I don't want it to get like weather beaten. So I don't leave it out all the time. But that is a treasure because she cut out little wildcat paw and put it on there, and she, has the big K. And so
oh wow. I hope it's good luck for us.
I hope so too. We got to beat Tennessee.
I know.
Yes. Yes. So it's so funny. And so this book is a joy to read because those things that Elvis said just made me laugh.
Yeah. Geez, I've got a book signing in Somerset soon, and that's just going to be especially nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that where were you born and raised in Somerset?
I was born in Somerset.
Yes.
I lived most of my life in Irving, Kentucky, like I said, but I always had family in Somerset. So I spent a lot of time there around Lake Cumberland.
Yes.
And like I said, I had to work on the weekends at those restaurants.
Yeah. Are those restaurants still open?
No. There is a story in there about when the stockyards burned down, and I had to work at that. It was only open on Saturday. I had to go every Saturday. Even after I went to pharmacy school and lived in Lexington, my dad was like, you want to keep driving that car? You're going to show up here and work on Saturday. This is a family business.
Yeah.
So when it burned down and he called me that Saturday morning, I was getting ready to go down there. He said, "Are you sure you didn't have something to do with this?"
So you get out of working on Saturday morning.
I didn't. I said, I've got an alibi, but I'm not going to say I'm unhappy about it. It was empty. It was an empty building. So
Yes.
Yeah, but I still always drive by there when I go to Somerset.
Yeah,
a lot of memories.
A lot of memories. Growing up in Lexington, my sister still lives there, but both my parents are gone. But just a ton of memories driving through town and thinking of the way things used to be. It's always very fun, and I think Kentucky's a special place. And
gosh, me too.
It's been wonderful to connect with you over the years and get to know you. And it's always funny growing up in Central Kentucky. I was always very careful about saying I was from Appalachia because I'm not.
Yeah.
And I think you probably understand what I mean by that.
Yeah. It's a little bit east of there.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so when I presented my Kentucky cookbook, I was careful about that. Plus I had moved to Northern Kentucky also, which is a whole different way of like such a German influence up here. And
right.
A lot of German food and cooking. But I think that you are from Appalachia. You were raised there.
I've always lived here.
Lived here. This food is a part of who you are. And I can't think of a more perfect person to write this book than you. So I'm really glad that you did.
Thank you. And I certainly appreciate the assistance that you gave me. You were a great help.
Yeah. And I think my joy is seeing people like you who have a skill and a passion about something in the kitchen. Sharing their recipes in a published cookbook. I think that it's a legacy you've created for our state, for Appalachia, for you, for your family, and this book will live on and really bring people a lot of joy. And I think that it's a beautiful way to share something that you care about so much.
Well, thank you so much, Maggie.
Yep. So it's a beautiful book. So we will link to a place where people can connect with you online.
Okay.
So where would that best place to be? And then my last question will be about if you have a favorite cookbook and what that might be.
Okay.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about where we can meet you online.
Okay. I am on Instagram at Appalachian Vegan, and you can also just find it under my name, Jan Brandenburg. On Facebook, also just listed under Jan Brandenburg. I do have a website, not particularly active at this time, but after this book is finished, because they don't want you to post those recipes ahead of time, I probably will do a little bit more with my webpage, but you can link to it. It's called Vegan Apothecarian, and you can link to it from my Instagram.
Okay, great. So I'll link to that in the show notes. So tell us a little bit about your favorite cookbook. Prior to all this, I'm sure there was a book that you had a relationship with. What was that book?
My first really strong connection was Claire's Corner Copia cookbook, and it is a New Haven, Connecticut restaurant that is still in business. I did get to visit it once years ago, and it was just like something I could really dig into. It didn't have especially exotic ingredients. It's not a vegan cookbook; it's a vegetarian cookbook, but there was lots of food in there that was vegan. There's no photographs in it. It just felt really accessible. and delicious recipes. I mean, just wonderful food.
Yes.
And so the chilies, the pasta sauces, all just really excellent. And some are super, super easy. And it's completely worn out, but it's stayed with me. I still use it.
Yeah. And I think this was one of your inspirations for the style of your book.
Yes. Yeah. A lot of drawings. My daughter-in-law actually did the drawings for my cookbook.
Nice. Nice. It's a beautiful book, a beautiful cover, and the Modern Mountain Cookbook, a plant-based celebration of Appalachia. All right, Jan. Well, good luck. Have fun out and about. I think one of the best parts of writing a cookbook is what you're embarking on now, and that's going out to meet all the people.
Yeah.
It's great.
I can't wait.
Yes.
Thank you, Maggie, so
You're
much.
You're welcome. Have a great day, and good luck with everything. And maybe we'll talk to you another time about another cookbook.
Okay, I hope so. All right, take care.
Thank you so much for joining us today for this episode of the Cookbook Love podcast. Again, all the links can be found in the show notes at www.cookbooklove.co. And if you are interested in writing a cookbook of your own, please check out the free cookbook writing masterclass called How to Get Paid to Write a Cookbook. It is designed specifically for food or nutrition experts, and you can check that out at www.cookbookwritersacademy.com/free. So that's it for today's episode of the Cookbook Love podcast. This is your host, Maggie Green. And until next time, have a great day and keep loving your cookbooks.
Thanks for listening to the Cookbook Love podcast. You can find out more information at www.cookbooklove.co.